Welcome to Messy Liberation, the podcast that dives deep into feminism, business, and personal growth. I'm Becky Mollenkamp.
And I'm Taina Brown. Get ready for another messy conversation through the eyes of two intersectional feminist coaches.
Let's get messy. Good morning or afternoon or whatever it is, wherever you're listening. Hello, Taina.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm all right. I'm sleepy. I'm still catching up from staying up
Yet
a couple
again.
nights ago.
Yet again.
No, not again. Not again. I didn't stay up late last night, but yeah.
For those who don't know why, it was because yet again you were knee deep in fanfic.
You brought it up this time. Actually, no, I guess I brought it up.
No, well, it doesn't matter. Listen, it's okay. I love that you have something you're passionate about, so that's fantastic. Well, let's talk about something I'm passionate about, which is stirring up the trolls on Threads. No, I'm not really passionate about it, but I seem to do it. But I actually thought that this post that we're going to talk about.
Wait, well, do you stir them up or do they just get stirred up?
The things I say get them stirred up.
That's their problem, but whatever.
Well, obviously, there are some folks out there who need to learn some emotional regulation.
Yes.
This post actually didn't stir up a ton of that. In fact, most of what it got was really thoughtful and interesting responses, I thought. I was really pleasantly surprised. The post on Threads, it was, I don't know, a couple weeks ago at this point, but we're getting around to talking to it now, was what's a subtle sign that tells you a man hates women, right? What are some subtle signs of misogyny? And it got over 1,000. It's like 1.5 thousand comments, which blew my mind away. I honestly, when I posted, I didn't think that many people would respond because it seems so, I don't know, specific. But I was really excited about it because it had so many responses. And again, so many of them were actually really interesting and thoughtful.
Yeah.
So I thought we would talk a little bit about what we thought of some of the responses and what were some of the ones that we were like, oh yeah, or maybe we hadn't thought of, or were just interesting. And then maybe we could also talk about the other side of this. What are some subtle signs that maybe a woman, that tells you a woman, and again, we're using some heteronormative language here, just being sort of simple, but obviously when I'm saying woman, I mean non-cis man.
Yeah.
What are some subtle signs that they have internalized misogyny that maybe they don't realize, or that we don't always like pick up on right away? So anyway.
Yeah. Can we define really quickly what misogyny is for people and why, or what it means when we say why men hate women? Like what, because I think one of the things I noticed in a lot of the, not in a lot of the responses, but in a few of the responses, and just from experience, when you say things like men hate women, people are like, oh no, they don't hate women. They just, they just have more ego, or they just this or whatever. And it's,
or maybe they don't always like certain specific women.
Right. I think people,
or certainly that's where I tend to get. And that's why I was surprised I didn't get as many of the not all men kind of folks showing up that I would have expected. But yeah, I mean, misogyny to me, and you're going to come in with the like real proper stuff, I have a feeling. But in my mind, misogyny is hatred of women. And what that means is not hating individual women, but hating femininity, womanhood, what being a woman represents.
Yes.
So it's not about hating women as a group or hating individual women and saying, I don't like women. It's saying I am, and when I say hating, it's really in my mind being afraid of, threatened by femininity. And femininity meaning those things that have been more classically conditioned into people who identify as women.
Yeah.
So that's where I come from, but I would love to hear what you have to say.
Yes. I mean, so according to Merriam-Webster, a misogynist is a person who hates women. They it also says as in a sexist person. And I think what I want people to understand is exactly like you said, when we talk about this, like we're talking on a systemic level. I think the mistake a lot of people make is they personalize it. They make it an individual issue, right? So the men in your life may not hate you per se, or you might not feel like they hate you, but on a more general level, on a systems-wide level, how do they feel about womanhood? How do they feel about how womanhood is represented and created and sustained in the world that we live in? That's what we're talking about. And when you pull back and look at it from that level, then you can notice the intricacies of how that shows up on a day-to-day basis, right? So they might not outrightly say that they hate women. They might not necessarily do anything really violent towards women, but because of their views on womanhood have been tainted by misogyny, they might show signs of just like not being comfortable around women, not having a specific expectation about how womanhood is supposed to be performed by the what they deem women around them. And so, and let's be clear, everybody performs their gender and their sexuality to a certain extent.
Well, gender as we define it or think
It's
of it
performative.
is performative 100%.
Yeah.
We don't live in a world that allows people to have full gender expression.
Right.
So
Right.
without that, everyone's performing to some degree.
Because there's always an expectation about how there are always unspoken rules about how gender is supposed to operate. So
And those rules can be life or death.
Right.
Really
So
threaten safety to varying degrees.
yeah. So in a system like that, regardless if you are complicit or subscribing or ascribing to those rules, or you're resisting those rules, it's still a performance because the system is created around rules and expectations. Okay, so let's
well, hold on. I'm going to add a couple other things really quickly because one,
Yeah.
when we understand misogyny in this way, we can also understand why we can have internalized representations of that as women, right? I don't hate women. I fucking love women. I love myself. That said, I also internalize all of these beliefs around what femininity should be, must be, looks like, what it means to be a woman, and why those things are devalued. And I internalize some of that devaluing inside of myself. That doesn't mean that I specifically, individually, or even on a whole hate women. I have been given these messages that I internalize, right? And so I think, again, when we look at it that way, it's important to understand, because also then when we explore issues around race or disability or any of these other marginalized identities, it frees us from some of that defensiveness and no, not me, and I'm not like them.
I'm a nice person, or they're a nice person. Well, you can be a nice person and still be racist or still be misogynist, because we're talking about the systems level. We're not talking about it as a moral judgment.
Yeah.
We're talking about how we engage.
Right. I'm a misogynist. I'm a racist. I'm an ableist. I am all of these things because they all exist inside of me, even when I am actively doing the work to try and rid myself of those things. All the excavation doesn't matter because I'm continuing to breathe in that air constantly. Right. So it's constantly being replenished. A new supply of that stuff is coming in as quickly as I'm trying to excavate it. That's not a personal failure. That's a systems failure. The other thing I wanted to bring up is just this idea of misandry before we get into this, because those are the folks who always like to show up and say, well, this very question shows me that you're a misandrist, and misandry or misandry, however people pronounce it,
is not a thing.
Theoretically the opposite of misogyny, right? So it's the hatred of men. And the defensive guys like to show up and call feminists misandrists, like to talk about, if you're talking about misogyny, then you got to talk about this other issue that's so pervasive. And exactly, it's not a thing. And here's why I think it's not, because what we are talking about is systemic issues. And at a systemic level, misandry doesn't exist.
Yeah.
We do not live in a world that is designed to hate men. In fact, that is why misogyny exists, because we are supposed to be more like men, right? All of the hatred of women is about not being men. And so we don't live in a world that misandry can exist. So it's not, while there technically might be a definition, because then they'll come back and say, oh, well, it does exist. Look at the definition from the dictionary. Yeah, that's a definition of something that is fantastical.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be lovely to live in a world where misandry could exist, but we don't. So I just want to throw that out.
Yeah. And I will add to that, because men are the yardstick by which gender is expected and regulated in most societies, that creates a power imbalance. That's why misandry doesn't exist, because of the way
reverse racism.
Or racism against white people. It doesn't exist. Because we're talking about how power and privilege operate on a systems wide level. And when you look at it like that, there's no world in which Black people have more power than white people to create and perpetuate harm over generations. The same way that there's, in most places, there are some indigenous matrilineal societies that still exist, but in most quote unquote developed places, westernized cultures, we live in patriarchal society. We live in a society that is ruled and operated and has been for generations by men, and that creates a power imbalance there.
Okay, good. So now I feel like definitionally We're coming now. Hopefully this will get a little more just fun and
It'll
interesting.
get juicy now.
Yeah, because now we can talk about some of the ones that resonated. So I'm curious because we talked about this and you were going to look at some of the responses. Were there any that really like jumped out at you or you thought were interesting?
Yeah, so I have my little sticky notes here.
Because there's a bunch of like you can almost categorize a lot of them, like bunched into
Yes.
some categories.
Yes.
So I wonder if there's any particular categories that
Yeah. Yeah.
giant category. I don't know if you noticed it, but I think the pervasive giant category was female. Anyone
Yeah.
who's talking about women as females. Did that
Yeah.
one jump out to you?
That didn't jump out to me just because it's so prevalent
Yeah.
that I was like, yeah, obviously, when they're like when they call women females or girls, right, versus calling men men instead of boys or males, right? Like, why is that? And I think what I want to preface this by saying is like the way that I like to approach things like this is like, yes, misogyny exists, and we all have, to some degree, a level of misogyny within us, right? As you were stating earlier, it's the air that we breathe, it's the water that we swim in. There's no way to escape it. As much work as we do, we're going to continue to have to do that work in order to resist it, right? So, on an individual level, there's that. But I think when I see a lot of these or when I encounter a lot of this, there's a curiosity in me, right? Especially when it comes to things that seem so innocuous, where it's
Mhm.
like calling women females or girls and then calling men men instead of boys or males. It's like, well, why do you do that? Right? Because I don't, on the individual level, again, right? Like we have to consider the individual level versus the systemic level, right? So if I were talking to an individual male or man or boy, right? And he's using this kind of double standardized language, my curiosity would be piqued. I'd be like, well, why do you do that? Like, I'm not going to attack this person right off the bat, right? I'm going to be curious. I'm going to be like, what's going on here? Like, what's the difference here? Why do you feel like that's the way you should address women versus the way that you address men, right? Because I don't think most people are like conscious of what they're doing. And so this sense of curiosity can like open up conversations. But on a systems wide level, yeah, fuck yes. Like, don't call women females or girls. Like, don't do that.
Right. Some of these I'm like, it's also because I asked subtle signs, right? And it was interesting to see some that came that I was like, these are not remotely subtle. These are glaring, right? But also that's interesting because I think it speaks to how much work we've done on whether we think they're subtle or not, right?
Yeah.
And the female one for me doesn't feel subtle. However, it did in me bring up some of that curiosity of interrogating the like, why does it bother me? Because I've always hated it, but why? What is it about that female thing I don't like? And so I looked up definitionally and traditionally the reason for that is because female is usually, except for the way it's now been kind of co-opted, is meant to be for an object versus a subject, right? It's an adjective versus a noun. Noun, woman is a noun, female is an adjective. So we would describe female anatomy, meaning
Yeah.
we're describing the anatomy of females, but so that has turned it into an object. It's about the anatomy. It's about
Yeah.
clothes. It's about the whatever. And
Yeah.
female is only supporting of the other things. So it's now making it an object, whereas woman is the noun, right?
It's
That
the
is the
person.
subject rather than the object. And so it's just a subtle way of removing our personhood,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so that is like, even though sometimes we're like, because men will come back and be like, who cares? Or, it's technically it's correct or whatever. And it's like, yeah, maybe. But
Mm-hmm.
here's why. This is the
Mm-hmm.
it's a subtle and small way of yet again removing my person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I hadn't considered, I don't think I've ever thought about it that way. I
I
think,
hadn't either until this post. This was actually good for me because I was
yeah.
like, well, this is not subtle. This is obvious. But again, like you were saying about that interrogation and like
Yeah.
questioning things, I was like, because somebody did say to me something of like, I don't know why that's a big deal or who cares
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. And so I went to figure it out and I was like,
Yeah.
here's why. Now I
Yeah.
understand. I always knew, but I wasn't sure the why. So
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when I was studying at a women's college, right? And I would tell people I was at a women's college, the women would be like, "Oh wow, that's cool." The men would be like, whenever or like when women would talk about other women would talk about me, and be like, "Oh, my friend, she goes to a women's college." A lot of times the men would say she goes to a girls' school.
yeah, well, and that's obviously another way of like,
Yeah.
making someone, because of the hierarchy we create,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Where adults have a higher standing than
Yeah.
children. It's
Yeah.
putting someone lower, which is also why, and with my son, teaching him, because he goes to a school that is incredibly diverse. He has a lot of Black friends. He's hearing kids call each other boy, and me having to help him understand that why, as a white, he is still a boy, but why, as a white boy, he can't refer to his friends, his Black friends, as
As
boy
boy. Yeah.
in the same way that they might, and having to help him understand that, removal of personhood and or stripping down of valuing.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing for a 9-year-old to understand, but it's important to start teaching that stuff early, because historically,
Yeah.
Black folks, Black men especially, have been called boy
As a
by
way to
white men.
inferiorize them. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
the same thing
Yeah.
with girls. And then somebody will say, yeah, but women do it with each other. And again, it's that same thing. My son's Black friends, they can call each other boy all day.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean my son gets to do that as a
Yeah.
white boy.
Yeah.
The same way that I'll call you my girl, right? I'll call you a bitch. I call you,
Yeah. Yeah. But I'm not calling a stranger a
right?
bitch.
I like to act cunty, whatever, but
Yeah.
but no man gets to say that to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I am curious because somebody pointed something out on a separate post, and I'm really quick, would love your take on it. Because I said something about girls. This inspired me recently to post something about, like, I think men who call women girls are sexist. And someone came in and said, I agree. I tend to agree, except for when it is our gay allies, like our gay friends, and they might be calling me girl too. And I don't know. For me, it feels
Yeah.
like it's sort of like we need that relationship for that to be true. But I'm
Yeah.
curious what you think.
I think it depends on the environment, right? Like if I'm at a gay bar
Huh?
or a gay birthday party or a gay wedding or something like that, where it's like a social, like group activity where it's like, what the vibe is going to be going into it, then I'm more okay with that. But if it's like, if it's outside of that context,
In a work environment.
in a work environment, yeah, where I might not know someone or I'm meeting someone for the first time, I'm just like, you don't know me. We're not. And I think that has more to do with the familiarity of it. I think, using such casual language with people is a very familiar thing. So I think in a way that's a little bit of a personal preference. I think,
Consent.
yeah, yeah. But I think one thing I will say on a systems wide level, and you will hear Black women say this a lot, is that the gay male persona is fabricated around how Black women act and how they have acted for generations around each other. And
Large
so,
ceiling of AAVE in the
yes,
community.
yes. So in general, like gay culture tends to make me a little bit uncomfortable because it's like, it's a gay person usually um, taking on this persona of a Black woman, whether she's gay or straight or queer or not, right? And so that's always been weird to me. It's always been like, why?
It's appropriation or appreciation, and or like there's a piece of me that can understand, hey, historically, as a gay man, I've been so marginalized and haven't had a space to exist. And with Black women, maybe I have found a place where there was some understanding around my
Yeah,
marginalization. And so, like, I've adopted and not maybe appropriated, but have adopted and appreciate and found that bond and familiarity
yeah.
there. And so that's been kind of replicated, but it can become very problematic.
It is. It is.
Very much can become appropriation and theft, and then taking that thing that community now can't use, yet
Yeah,
you're going to,
yeah,
use that for your own
yeah,
gain.
yeah. I think it's that, but I think it's also Black women culturally and historically, the way that they act around each other has been it has been a form of resistance. And so I think gay culture has latched on to that that's very, very specific way of resistance in order to reclaim their own identities. But what they've done is they mapped Black womanhood onto their identity.
Yeah.
So, and that's not to say that like it needs to be completely erased, right? I think I don't know what the solution is here, right? But I think an understanding of that history and of what's actually happening there is important. Okay, so
Well, just quickly to say, I think the problem becomes when there isn't that appreciation and acknowledgement, and it becomes instead this feeling of like co-opting and we own this. We did this without recognizing we did this. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, by the way, like in the same way, I wouldn't call you cis. Like that to me doesn't feel like, even though, you know, we're both women, that doesn't feel like, it doesn't feel appropriate for me as a white woman to lean on that kind of language that tends to be more familiar with familiar folks inside of the Black woman community, right? To call each other cis. Like, I don't feel like that's appropriate. I wouldn't call you girl either, by the way. But like, there might be some people that I might say, like, these are my girls. I'm not that person, so I wouldn't. But there are people who do that, and like I can understand it. So anyway, okay.
Yeah.
What ones came out to you?
Yeah. So I think one of the ones that I saw that I was like, not enough people, it didn't feel like enough people were talking about this, and it never feels like enough talking about it, but it's like how men treat trans women or how they feel about trans women.
Huge.
And so, and I think it ties into that whole like female versus women thing, right? Because I think female as an adjective creates this sort of like essentialization of what it means to be a woman, right? When we say female, a lot of times the implied reference is like the female anatomy. And so, and when we think about womanhood as having a very specific female anatomy, then that's exclusive of the trans identity and the trans experience. And so, and I don't think that's addressed enough. Like men who feel uncomfortable around trans women or just trans people in general, that's a fucking big red flag for me, because it's like, what about that makes you uncomfortable? It's not threatening to you.
Yeah. The fetishizing of it.
Yeah, and if you feel like it's threatening to you, why?
Right. Well, and I would go, and this might be slightly controversial, although I see trans folks who are also talking about this, is that step further of folks, and this is that internalized also for women, I think, to examine, which is protecting trans folks when we're talking about like protect the dolls, this whole idea of I protect, like I care about and I'm protecting and I'm comfortable with trans folks trans women, as long as they're performing femininity in the way that I think femininity should be performed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So our trans friends who maybe are trans and non-binary or who are, you know,
who are like passing
trans women, but aren't femme. Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. When our inclusion, our care for only includes trans folks who are passing, who are performing, whatever. I'm using big quotes for anybody who's listening. Then that's a problem too. Like I don't have a problem in theory with the idea of protect the dolls, like that as a saying or whatever. But if that's where your care for the trans community stops and ends, like that's a problem. Yeah. That's a problem because that again is that misogyny of I only like women when they are showing up the way I think women are supposed to show up. Like you need to look a certain way, act a certain way, talk a certain way, dress a certain way. If you're not doing those things, then I don't value you as a woman, and I don't think that I don't value you as a human.
Yeah, you're not worth, you know, the idea of womanhood in my mind. Yeah. And I think that also ties into whether a woman is trans or not. Fat women,
there was
quote unquote ugly women.
Yet men who are only attracted to skinny or traditionally beautiful women, whatever, that's a real, like men who
disabled women.
Like, and then these men who will be like, well, everybody has a type, right? And that to me is very interesting because their type is almost always physical, right? It has nothing to do with anything else. It's almost always physical and somehow conveniently almost always matches the standard, right? Yeah. The conditioning that we all receive. So is it a type or is it your conditioning? Yeah. The men who can't question that, parse that out, who are interested in it, this will sort of attribute it to, well, we all have a type. That's a big red flag.
Yeah. 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 And I think, you know, at the individual level, like that's something that we can all interrogate within ourselves, like our quote unquote type, right? Like how much of your type is based on what you've been told should be an appropriate partner versus what really matters to have in an appropriate partner.
Just about nature versus nurture. If it was just naturally men attracted to these kind of women, it doesn't take much for that to fall apart when you just look historically and culturally at the differences in what is considered like the typical type for someone. Yeah. It's just not true. It has changed dramatically over time and even dramatically within cultures of what is considered beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Another one that I saw that I don't that people talk about, but not in the context of misogyny. They talk about it in the context of just like work culture. It's like men who don't speak directly to women in meetings.
Yep. And again, this was one to me that feels like so not subtle. And
Mm-hmm.
yet, for some people, that says a lot. Like that we are still accepting so much as just the way it is.
Yeah.
Right. And that's
Yeah.
scary because, yeah, again, it's that not this person doesn't have any value in the room.
Yeah, yeah, it's like they're invisible, right? Men who don't speak directly to women in meetings, men who speak over women in meetings, obviously men who mansplain or and this has happened. Like I remember when this first happened to me, I was shocked. Even though I knew it happens all the time, but when it happened to me, I was like, what the fuck? This just happened to me when I had an idea and everyone was like, okay. And then a man had the same idea, and everyone was like, okay, what about this? And then they had questions, and then they had, input, and then they had feedback, and then they were considering it, right? And so things like that happen in the workplace. Like, again, a lot of times when we talk about things like misogyny and racism and things like that, we talk about it on the interpersonal, or people only consider it as an interpersonal or individual issue. So they kind of box it into interpersonal relationships, but then like work stuff becomes like this other thing that's kind of separate because of the way that we have been conditioned to compartmentalize our lives. So thinking about misogyny in the workplace, right, is like it's this intersection of workplace dynamics and interpersonal issues that often gets overlooked, right? Like we don't necessarily think about workplace stuff as interpersonal issues. We think about it as work issues, but it's both. It's both.
The stuff doesn't ever get removed from any situation.
Yeah.
Similar to that, I think, too, is the one that somebody brought up, and I had brought up in a post a long time ago, which is playing devil's advocate.
Mm,
It tends to be, I have noticed this over time, especially in that workplace environment. The one who's showing up to play devil's advocate is usually the man and or the woman who's trying to show up in the room as the masculine type
yeah.
of voice, right? And I think that's interesting because again, that's just another way of sort of excusing a bad behavior, of excusing yourself for talking over, mansplaining,
Mm-hmm.
questioning, a woman is to be like, well, it's no. I'm just playing devil's advocate here, right? Like I'm not actually questioning you. I'm just making sure these questions are coming up or that we are thinking
Yeah.
about what might happen. And that framing this devil's advocate thing it is, I wish people would just do more of what it really is, which is, I don't believe you or I don't agree with you or
Yeah.
right. But instead it's
Yeah.
almost like passive aggressive way of
Yes.
discounting a voice in the room.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think some other ways that like, and I just want to throw this out there really quick, that misogyny shows up in the workplace is in regards to hiring practices, right? Men are usually considered for their potential versus women are considered for their experience. How much potential does this candidate have to grow and, add value to our team versus, well, she doesn't have enough experience under her belt or she didn't have the right job titles, so we're not sure if she's a good fit. But then also women being judged in the workplace for how committed they are to the work because they might have responsibilities outside of work versus just that not fucking happening for men, regardless of whether they have responsibilities, right? And responsibilities could be children, could be caretaking, could be potentially having children in the future. And so,
Well, in
and
related
this,
to that, being discounted for time away from career for raising children as if there aren't incredible real life skills inside of that, right?
yeah,
I think that's another
yeah,
thing that's
yeah,
clearly misogyny because it's only
yeah,
happening with women, which reminds me too of just the very idea of like balancing it all, having this work life balance of the questions that we ask of politicians and workers and things about how do they manage life with children and it's always of women and never of men. The idea of mom guilt, all these
yeah.
things are not about like it's not happening with
Yeah.
men.
Yeah, yeah. This is actually just a little sidebar. It's a really big problem in Japan. And
Mm.
so this is why the population for a long time has been dwindling in Japan because women have basically decided not to get married and not to have kids in Japan because it's
Korea too, from what I understand,
yeah,
right?
because it's detrimental to their careers. And so they have for a long time not advanced in their careers because of the way that expectations are set on them, or what employers assume. They assume that once a woman has a child that they're going to just leave work. So hiring and promotional things have not happened. So for a few decades now, women have just been like, okay, well, we just won't have kids.
The same thing's happening here, even if it's not getting the same kind of name or being considered a movement like it is in other parts of the world, because birth rates are falling here as well. Marriage rates are falling here as well, big time. In fact, it's becoming bigger and bigger news, which is no shock then that the response that's happening at a political level is happening to try and change that. Because I think the reasons are very much the same. Women are just sick of it.
What else for you?
Another one that I thought was really interesting, because I have heard this so many times in relationships, is men who are just, I just don't really like female artists. I don't really like female musicians. I don't really listen. And by the way, usually female. I don't listen to music by women. Like, I can't relate, or I don't think it's good. Women who are comedians, they're not funny, right? Like, this devaluing of women, it's certainly inside of creative spaces, but in many spaces.
Yeah. Why is that a problem, Becky? Can you explain to it? Can you explain to the class why that's a problem?
Well, because it's bullshit. I think it's utter bullshit that they think that women aren't as talented, can't be as talented, that they can't be as funny. Of course they can. And I think it's probably because maybe it's about experiences that they can't relate to.
Yeah.
Rather than understanding, oh, I may not relate to that experience, so maybe I'm not interested because I don't relate to it. It's this equating it with lack of talent, because it's not centering and speaking to me, then it must not actually be good. Is that kind of my to the place that you're
Yeah, it does. It does. That was going to be the next thing I brought up too, is like this lack of like women in creative spaces that men engage with, right? Whether it's art, music, TV shows, films, comedians, etc. And for me, like, yes, and so much of what is already out there in the creative space is centered around men. So like, why would it hurt to add a few women in there for you? Like, do you know how tired I am of seeing another fucking movie or TV show about a white male protagonist? I can't. Like, every time something new comes out and it's like the white male protagonist finding himself, and I'm just like, fuck, again? And it's not that I can't relate to it, right? Because I think when people say that argument, they're like, well, I can't relate to it. Well, first of all, that's fucking bullshit, because on some level you can relate to it.
We're all human,
we're all human. We
Yeah.
all have needs, we all have desires, so you can relate to it on that level. You just don't fucking want to do the work to relate to it on that level, right? Because it feels threatening to you, because you don't care, because you don't prioritize it, because it's not important to you. And so I feel really strongly about.
Yeah, it drives me absolutely batty when that sort of thing comes up, because I've heard it so much from men over time. And it's another one where it's like, it's not my type sort of thing, right? And it's like, is that true that you can't relate, or you don't find it interesting? Yeah. Or is it that you've been conditioned to believe that those stories aren't relevant in your life? Or
they're not important.
Right. Because, oftentimes, not always, but, there are stories, certainly when they center women, many times they end up centering parenting. Interestingly, so many stories that center men don't do that. Yeah. And so the men might relate to the stories where the parenting is uncentered, but why? It's like you said, that interrogation of why. And it's like, oh, because I'm not centering parenting in my life because I'm expecting her to do that. Yeah. So I'm not relating to this because of that. But rather than saying that's a problem, and maybe I should be watching these things to better understand that, better understand her, better understand the problem in society that has this, it's just like, no, it's relevant to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's what really pisses me off, is that they think that's the solution, right? The solution is not that, oh, I should learn more, but I should just not engage with it. Right.
Right. That you watch that. That's
for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, I want to say nothing pissed me off more. That's a little hyperbolic, but it really pissed me off when Wicked, which is centered around female relationships, the film Wicked, first of all, like, the entire team did such an amazing job. Whether you are a musical theater person or not, I'm not a musical theater person. I do enjoy going to a live show, but I was not a musical theater kid growing up. Like, I'm not that person. but I enjoyed Wicked. I've seen it on stage several times. I was excited for the film to come out. I'm excited for part two to come out in a few months now in November. The director, the actors, the costuming, the music, the set design, like all of it was just fucking phenomenal. And the way that they got snubbed during Oscar season, during award season, especially during the Oscars, was wild to me. It was such a stark example of how deprioritized creative works are that center on the experience of women,
Well, you
the
can look
experience of
at
women
how few
friendships.
women have ever won the directing award or screenwriting because our stories, quote unquote, aren't even being told. And when they aren't being valued,
Yeah,
right? Because so many of the people that are determining that are men,
yeah, yeah.
right?
And then the one film that racked up a lot of awards was Anora, which I haven't seen Anora, so but I know what it's about. And I'm not saying that it wasn't well done, and I'm not saying that it didn't deserve the awards. It very well might have. But it's a movie about a woman who is performing femininity in a way that most men are more apt to engage with as a stripper, right? As this object of affection that basically gets used because at the end of the film she gets left by her love interest because of his ties to his family, right? Like he chooses his family over her. And so she becomes like this plaything for him that he just kind of obsesses over. They get married on a whim. Then his parents come and are like, no, you can't have her. And he's like, okay, fine. Right. So it's like the story of the use of womanhood,
I
the,
think if
the
you look
objectification. And
so
that won all
many
these awards.
Yeah, so many of the women who've won acting awards, if you really start to look at it, similar sort of roles, right? Another thing this makes me think of too, though, getting out of visual elements and into the audio elements of music, because the same thing happens with musicians. And as much as I have issues with Taylor Swift, one area that I can relate to in this is the way men love to talk about how they don't like her music because it's just about breaking up with
Breakup
men.
songs.
It's just about breakup songs. It's just about, these things that they don't really understand. She's whiny, she's upset, whatever. And it's like, have no men ever been through breakups? Do men like
That's what country music is based on.
right? Beer and breakups, baby, and dogs. I know. And so the way that she gets treated over that, where there are just as many men writing songs about these things, just as many men who've experienced these things, somehow when she does it, she's whiny. She's,
Yeah.
Whatever the words are they attach to her. So
Yeah. Yeah.
another quick one that I saw that was in here that's kind of tangentially related to this was men who blame Yoko for the breakup of the Beatles. And that one, because my husband does this sometimes, and I told him this one, he gave
That's
me an
a
eye.
big one.
But I thought it was fantastic because I'm like, interesting, isn't it? For men who couldn't manage to stay together,
Yeah.
especially
To just be friends.
two men who couldn't, like, what broke them up was power dynamics, power struggles, egos, men needing more validation, all of that stuff. It was not about Yoko Ono being in the room. That's such an easy way to dismiss their own inability to have emotional intelligence and just make it about a.
Yeah.
I thought
Yeah.
that was a great one.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the way that they refuse to take accountability for themselves and their experiences, right? And which, like, it ties into how the idea or the way that, like, some men are always have a crazy ex. Like, no matter what happened, no matter how many exes they had, it's the ex's fault, right? And again, not saying that it probably wasn't, right? It takes two people to break up. But,
Well,
like,
I was
what
saying,
was your role?
exactly. She may have been, but also you. What did you
Yeah.
do? A man
Yeah.
who cannot own any part of his role in a breakup, and that's something I take pride in that I always I know, because even if I wasn't the reason we broke up, like in the case of somebody, my first boyfriend who cheated on me, I allowed, there was my side of that had such low self-esteem that I was allowing behavior to happen that shouldn't have, right? And if I can't own that part of it, the ways that my low self-esteem and my inability to advocate for myself played a role in that, I will never change. And I will just be in one of those relationships after another. So if a man starts saying stuff about every ex being crazy, guess what? He's going to think you're crazy at some point, right?
Yeah.
He's not learning. So
Yeah.
that was a good one. Okay. Can we talk about some of the things about women now? Just because I know we're running out of time, but
Yeah. Yeah.
because one that came up for me is if your friend group all looks like you, and obviously if all of your friends are the same shade as you, then that's going to tell you something about probably some racist beliefs and internalized racism that you need to evaluate. But I'm also talking about like if they're all the same shape as you, they all the same size as you, they all wear makeup in the way that you do, if all of your interests are exactly alike and all of that, and they're all sort of performing femininity in the same way that you're performing femininity, that's probably, to me, that can be a sign of a problem, because it means that you only think that a woman is really a woman who can be one of your girls if she's performing femininity the same way you are.
Yeah, I agree. As a woman, like, obviously, as we talked earlier, like, there is an element of internalized misogyny within myself that I'm constantly, like, having to interrogate and, like, consider and be curious about and actively work against. But if I'm ever introduced to a group of women or invited somewhere and all the women look the same, immediately I'm on edge. I'm like, why does everyone look the same here? Right? Why are all they the same skin color, or why are they all dressed the same? Literally, I remember once I was out with my wife and there was a group of women who came in. I think we were like at a coffee shop or something, and it was like a group of friends who came in, and they were literally all wearing the same thing. It was like 4 or 5 of them. I call it the white girl uniform because it was like fall. It was like the white girl fall uniform with like the vest and the boots and the jeans and the hat.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
They're all
then
their pumpkins, their PSL.
right. Another time I was having lunch with another girlfriend, and it was 2 couples, like a few tables from us, and the men were dressed the same and the women were dressed the same. Like, again, that uniform, right? And I'm just like, that puts me on edge, because it's like, what are these the only people that you ever engage with, right? Because that, for one, that shows me how small your world is, like how small your experience is, how small of a person you might be. And I don't want to be around those people.
And also, you're not willing to challenge yourself,
Right.
right? Because clearly you're just trying to stay within what feels comfortable to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not growth. Like, there's no
No.
challenge of that. And part of it for me now is like I have to be careful to make sure that I'm still comfortable being around women who wear a lot of makeup, that do spend a lot of time on their appearance, because that's something that I now do not value at all. But I actually think it's a form of misogyny when I'm judging them for that now, right?
Yeah.
I have to be careful of that as well, right? So it's not just like, oh, you just the women who are performing femininity in that one way.
Right.
So if you have them in your life, it's a problem. It's also saying I reject all of that, right? I think for me, I have to watch when I'm judging people who have plastic surgery, right? I'm at the place now where it's this other side of it. I think there are many women who are showing up in the ways of the way we're conditioned to believe femininity should be performed. Will often have a lot of judgments against women who are challenging those norms.
Yeah.
And that's definitely misogyny. But I think we, on the other side of that, maybe the people who are now rejecting and pushing back against a lot of the ways we've been told to perform femininity, we have to watch out for those same judgments against women who are still performing in that way. Because that's just another form of misogyny.
Yeah,
is this
it's still creating that, like, this is the right way and this is not the right way. Yeah. One other thing that that someone brought up on your threads posts that I think is a big one is like when people, but specifically men, right? Because that's what we're talking about here, talk about the value that women bring to relationships. Like, first of all, the world is centered around men, right? So, like, it's easy for them to bring value to a relationship because, in general, life is easier for them, right? They have more privilege, they have more power. It's easier for them to get a higher paying job. It's easier for them to get into college. It's easier for them to, be buddy buddy with their boss. It's easier for them to be a parent. It's easier for them to.
There's no way it's not easier for them. I'd say it's easier for them in all the ways.
In all the ways. So, like, what about that makes it okay for you to judge what a woman brings to the table, right? When almost everything in the world is stacked against her. And yet, and I saw this TikTok the other day, and yet women are outperforming men. They're
For a long time.
For a long time. They're more educated. They're more culturally sensitive. Right? Like, they have all these things behind them. Like, the world is literally set up for you to succeed. The bar is so fucking low for you to succeed. But you want to talk about what
high
value
value woman.
A high value woman, what a woman is bringing to the table for you. But you better, like, do something else.
I just posted like yesterday too on Threads saying something about the way that a man with a giant pot belly has so much to say about how small a woman should be. And it just feels like it's that same thing there where it's like these men who are talking about, you know, the high value women and what they're bringing to the table. Some of them are gym bros, so they've got great bodies maybe, but in so many other ways, they're so deficient. And it's just
Yeah.
amazing to me, like a little introspection.
Yeah.
Right? Just a
Yeah.
little, like, take a look in the mirror and ask yourself, before I start worrying about what she's bringing to the table, what am I bringing to the fucking
Yeah.
table?
Yeah. You have like the emotional bandwidth of a plant. Like what
Mm-hmm.
what makes you think you have a right to demand more?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think we could talk about this all day because there's just so much here. But I do think it's interesting because I think most of us who are listening to this, like, yeah, we get it, men, all the things. But I do think it's also really interesting to turn a lot of those back on yourself because I also will meet women who all their favorite musicians are men.
Mm-hmm.
To interrogate some of that. The
Yeah.
shows they're watching, they're all centering men. Now, some of that is about accessibility, right? What's even
Yeah.
made available to us. But are we not seeking out? Are we not trying? And again, to take it beyond just gender and sex, also, if all the shows you're watching are starring all white casts, if the music you're listening to are only white artists, like, and that's just one piece of this. But, you know,
Yeah.
and your friend group, like all of these things, I think it's important for us to interrogate it in ourselves, to
Yeah.
take that. It's easy for us to project out and be like, those men and blah, 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 they needed it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, all that is a yes. The and is, but we need to do the same for ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Where are we
Yeah.
also participating in this? Because
Yeah.
we are in so many ways. And it's important for us to look at that.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say, you know, when I was a baby feminist and having my baby feminist awakening, like one of the bigger things for me that I had to realize, like, oh, this is fucking misogyny, is like disliking Taylor Swift because of her music, right? And so now I dislike her for other reasons,
Yeah,
right?
me too.
Because she performs,
I'm on the anti-billionaire train
right?
with
Because
that.
she's a billionaire, because she performs this level of like white feminism or white femininity that
Some of the people she
is
in her
right,
friend
right,
group who are really
right. But I
100%.
can enjoy her music now. But I can enjoy her music now for what it is, right?
Well,
And
for me, it was a
so,
lot of judgment of women's looks. And
yeah,
I still find it coming up all the time where I have to check myself. And it's okay. Of course. It's the checking ourselves that's important. It's not the like trying to get rid of it. It's the noticing of it.
it's the noticing it, right? Yeah, and coming to a better conclusion, right? And so the same thing with like women who wear makeup. Like I was so against it, hating the color pink, right? I was like, no, not pink. It's
Oh my God.
so representative of like blah blah
Oh,
blah blah. And
Taina,
it's like,
same,
what did the
same in
color
my
pink
view.
ever do to me? What did the color pink ever do to me? You know?
I actually really like it, but I went through a major rejection of it too.
Yeah, yeah. There were a lot of things, you know, where I was like, no, I'm gonna be different. So I'm gonna like resist like the things that traditional quote unquote womanhood or femininity says we should be. And now it's like, well, I can engage with those things just with a higher consciousness, with in a more appropriate way, in a healthier way than thinking that there's one specific way to be a woman or to perform womanhood. Because again, that goes to the essentialism, right? Regardless
Right.
of what the fuck is between my legs, like it's essentializing what it means to be a woman. It's creating these rules that create exclusions where they shouldn't be.
Yeah. It's participating in that binary, right?
Mhm.
Absolutely. And another area where I'm still constantly working on this is around aging as I begin
Mm.
to age, because there's so much misogyny built into the aging process and what is and
Mhm.
isn't allowed, quote unquote. So yeah, I think the big thing is just like judge away with men. Yay. It was fun. I go read the post. I'll link to it in the show notes. Go read it, enjoy, but also don't let it stop there. Do that internal investigation of where am I still participating in these systems? Because I think that part's
Yeah.
really important and we don't do it.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to do the like they suck, but I think it's important to notice because so much of that is projection too, often of like our own insecurities when we're judging other people, whatever. It's like our own stuff. So
Yeah.
just watch that. Anyway, this was fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And have conversations with the men in your life about this. Don't just look the other way. Don't just ignore it, because that's enabling, right? You're essentially giving them permission to behave this way and to hold on to these beliefs.
Read some of these responses to your partner if they are male, if you're in a heteronormative
And see
relationship,
how they
or your
respond.
brother or your dad. Yeah, and see what they say.
Or someone you're interested in dating. See how they respond.
For sure. My husband and I had some interesting conversations about some of them, so it was really good. And even though he rolled his eyes at the Yoko Ono one, I know it got him thinking, because I was like, that one's real interesting, isn't it? So yeah, I agree. All right. Well, it was so good to see you again, as always. And thank you everyone for listening. Thanks for listening to Messy Liberation.
Will you please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen?
I know people say that all the time. And if you're like me, often you just go on to the next podcast. But truly, taking that moment to do that will really help us reach a wider audience.
Thank you so much for your support and for listening today.
Until next time.